The opinions expressed on the radio program by the hosts, co-hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions and responsibility of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Genesis Radio, www.genesisradio.com, Genesis Radio's owners, management, or affiliates.
It's another Thoughtful Thursday, and you're on the air with Ron and Romane. Well, actually, Ron and Mama C today. Romane could not be here. She's dealing with some issues again, some serious ones. So, again, I'll ask you to keep thoughts and prayers with Romane and her family. So we are here with the capable Mama C, who's no stranger to Gynesis Radio, the actual creator of the Ladies' Room, right?
Let's see. Sister Chat, the Ladies' Room, and lastly, the Sistership.
Okay, where do you go?
All right.
All of that. Okay, so today there's an issue I wanted to talk about. I think it's very important. I think that perhaps this might be the singular issue that is probably one of the reasons why we, meaning Black people or Black men and women, are having difficulty getting together and forming lasting relationships. And the question that I ask is, do Black women trust Black men? Now, typically, when that issue comes up, people focus on things like infidelity, I guess Black men being absent, or perhaps advocating. No, that's not the word I'm looking for.
Oh, that happens to you too, huh?
Yeah.
I'll be trying to figure out. I'm like, the word is there.
It's abdicate. Abdicating their role as husbands and fathers and role models in the Black community. But today, I want to look at it from a different perspective, through a different lens. Today, I want to talk about the possibility that in our DNA that is handed down from our ancestors, a number of experiences, some great, all of the achievements of my ancestors. But some of these experiences are very painful. And many of these experiences are unique to us because it was us that spent 400 years as slaves to America, building America's wealth.
Building America, period.
Yes. And in terms of the lack of trust, I think it goes back to what happened on the plantation. I mean, we know that now with the advent of DNA, we know that those of us who explore our ancestral history will find that there are Europeans within our DNA chain. We have that familial DNA. And even though there are some places in the country like Florida.
Really?
Yeah, right? There are some places like Florida and Texas that want to rewrite the history of the African slave trade or the African Holocaust. The reality is, in our DNA is that familial link. And we have to be cognizant of the fact that that DNA that we share, a lot of it was not the result of a loving, consensual relationship. This was the result of rape.
Rape.
Yes. And for Black men, during that time, and we're talking about a very dark period in our history, many Black men were so traumatized and so afraid of the slave master.
And rightfully so.
Well, yes.
Rightfully so.
Yes and no, right? Because I think that, and you would be better suited to answer this question, but I think that intuitively, I think Black women realize on one level that there was nothing he could have done.
Right.
If he would have taken any sort of action to prevent, the slave master, the overseer, whoever it was, from doing whatever he was planning on doing, raping his woman, that he would have been killed. But I also think on a deeper level, on an emotional level, I think that there is something there that says he could have done something. And could something have been done? Absolutely. And I say that because numerically, there may have been 50, 100, 300 slaves on some of the larger plantations. How many overseers were there? 1, 2, the master and his family. So you might have 10 or 15 Europeans on a plantation, but 300 Africans or enslaved Africans.
Yeah.
And we've had successful uprisings, right? Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, and a host of others, right? Not just here, but throughout the diaspora. So could something have been done? Yes. I think that, again, Black women make the excuse intuitively that, well, I didn't want him to get killed.
Well, I don't think that's an excuse. That was a fear on her part and a desire to save her man from being horrifically killed. Not just shot and killed, horrific skinned. I mean, when you look at some of the things that white Europeans did during that time, horrific. So that just struck fear into the minds, the hearts, the psyche, the all the being of a woman. And no woman wants to see her man go through something like that. They're horrific. I've seen pictures that have made me want to throw up. And so, I mean, when you instill that kind of fear into a people, of course, things that could have been done weren't done because of fear. So, it was a precarious and very dark time in our lives. And I think that fear is still ingrained in our souls to a certain extent.
And I think that this issue is in many respects at the heart of our inability to come together. Because I think that DNA that we get from our ancestors that is handed down to us, I think that buried in there are those experiences. And I think that for Black women, I think that it's kind of, for lack of a better term, a double whammy. Because after this sometimes very violent rape, sometimes the Black man would not know how to respond. He wouldn't comfort her, right? Sometimes his anger, which should have been directed at the master, at the overseer, was directed at her, right? And of course, that was the beginning of a rift, right? I'm enduring all of this. I understand that you may be made to watch, right? And I understand how the whole process is to demasculate you, emasculate you, right? I understand that. But how, I guess on a spiritual level, how can you be so afraid of another man, another human being? How? When in Africa, we protected our homes, our villages, our cities, our women.
Right.
We fought wars, right? It's not like it was something that was foreign to us, right? We fought wars. Sometimes wars amongst people that look like us. Sometimes we fought wars with Europeans. But now we're to the point where we do nothing. We just allow it to happen.
Well, I think the whole situation is different now. I think a lot of Black men are suffering from half-assedness.
Okay.
um, whatever is going on within the cockles of their souls and within their minds in general, they don't feel responsible, and they're not taking responsibility. No one's gonna skip. You're not being skinned. You're not being cut and your guts falling out. You're not being whipped to your flesh just crumbles.
Mhm.
What's happening now is that a lot of black men are taking a I don't give a shit attitude
Mhm.
when it comes to their responsibility, because a lot of women have had to take on the responsibility that men normally take on.
Mhm.
And so a lot of men today, black men in particular, and I think men in general, but black men in particular, uh, would rather allow the woman to continue to wear the pants and to provide for the family. And they do as little as possible to ensure the overall well being of the family.
Mhm.
And I'd have to say, there was a time after slavery where black men did step up to the plate.
Mhm.
They did step up to the plate.
Absolutely.
So, what the hell happened? That they stopped stepping up to the plate, stopped protecting their black women, stopped protecting and providing for their children and their families. What the hell happened?
Well, you know what? I think that it goes back to what happened on the plantation.
Well, you know
Right.
what? That's an excuse now.
But
I think that's an excuse,
but I'm
Rob.
not looking at it in terms of the excuse. See, when we look at a situation, we look at the effect and not necessarily the cause. So I'm trying to identify the cause, right? And I think that the cause was what happened on the plantation, and I think that it is a carryover to this very day, right?
But when do we get over the cause? You
I
know,
think
when is that going to happen?
I think that we first have to recognize the fact, because when I asked you about coming on the show, I understood that you and I are like-minded in the point that both of us believe that the ancestors play a very powerful role in your life, in your daily life.
Mhm.
But I think that for the vast majority of us black people in this country, we won't acknowledge the existence of the ancestors because we're told, well, that's not of God. Most of us throughout the diaspora are either Christian, Muslim, or
Jewish.
well, I would say Hebrew Israelite, right?
Mhm.
All of those are religions that are basically foreign
To our nature.
to us,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
I don't want to say foreign to the land of Africa, but foreign to us. So when we are placed into a religion and given this religious dogma, we're going to reject everything that talks about or suggests that our ancestors exist, right? Or to acknowledge them, even though every religion does it, right? They may not do it openly, but for us, we're told don't even do it in a closed meeting because it's wrong. So until we begin to acknowledge the fact that, well, we are the sum total of our ancestors and their experiences, until we begin to acknowledge that and realize that, you know what, along the way, mistakes were made, horrible mistakes, right? Until we begin to realize and understand that we'll never be able to connect with the power source.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think religion plays a big part in defacing our value as a people.
Mm-hmm.
And I watch, I'm on Facebook and I see some of the things. I shared a post recently that says, in order to break generational curses, we have to stop buying into generational lies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And we have to stop telling generational lies.
Mm-hmm.
And within Christianity itself and a lot of these other religions, there's a lot of generational lies that our people refuse to accept
Mhm.
because they've been so conditioned to believe some of the craziness
Mhm.
that they don't even stop to think. If you stop to think about some of the things that they're being taught and that they're saying on a daily basis, it's like, but that doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't.
It doesn't make sense. And so we've been so screwed up in the head with respect to our falling victim to religion that we just go along like little sheep, bah, bah, repeating stuff that again doesn't make sense and has no validity with respect to who we are and the power we have as a people.
Well, something you brought up an interesting point. You said, I guess what you're addressing the idea of solutions. Right?
We yeah, but we have to first step up to the plate when it comes to disregarding a lot of the conditioning
Mm-hmm.
that is keeping us stuck
Mm-hmm.
in the rabbit holes of life.
Well, you know what? I think that so what happened in South Africa after the fall of apartheid, many people, I guess there were kind of two camps in Africa, those that wanted revenge,
Right.
that wanted to say, we're going to drive these white farmers off of our land,
Mm-hmm.
right? The most fertile land in Southern Africa. We're going to make them pay for what they've done for centuries.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side of that, there were those who say, you know what? There's been enough war, enough killing. We need a truth and reconciliation commission where you're going to have to sit down and admit what you did,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Get it out in the open. And then we'll see if there is forgiveness for you.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe in this country, Black people need to have a truth and reconciliation, I guess, committee or meeting, where we're going to sit down and we're going to, because I think that if you deny the ancestors, then you are denying the experiences that they had.
And the power that comes from them,
Mm-hmm.
that resonates within us.
Mm-hmm.
And until we are willing to acknowledge the presence of the ancestors and the spirit of their being
Mm-hmm.
in us, we're never going to get anywhere. We're never going to get anywhere. This will be an ongoing dialogue, and people will keep pointing fingers at each other
Mm-hmm.
rather than looking at themselves and saying, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Who am I really?
Right.
Not who the church tells me I am, not who the mosque tells me who I am, not who the synagogue tells me. Who am I?
Right.
And then come up with an answer that that you can embrace and work with
Mm-hmm.
and feel whole with. A lot of people don't feel whole.
Well, it's difficult to feel whole when you really don't know who you are, where you come from.
Absolutely.
But at this stage of the game, we're dealing with America 2024. And it seems that in this country, we're building toward a crescendo. Something's going to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not going to be good.
It's not going to be good.
Particularly-
Get your passports ready, because at some point
Right.
we're going to have to flee, because this country is going to fall. And when it does, those who can't get out are going to fall with it.
Well, I would say that this country has already fallen to the point that, Donald Trump was in the White House.
Oh, Lord have mercy.
And may get back in there.
And,
just before we came on air, I was telling Terry about down in Florida, there is sort of a vacuum created by the fact that Florida is being tough on immigration.
right.
That's this Republican thing, we have immigrants pouring into this country, they're a whore, they're this, they're that, they're bringing drugs, they're bringing guns. The reality is, when you stop allowing immigration into places like Florida, people that would normally work in agriculture are no longer there. So down in Florida, what they want to do, there's a bill where they're proposing allowing children under the age of 18 to go back
work
in the fields.
Work in the fields,
right?
Yeah.
And there was an individual, Caucasian man, who said, "This is going to affect white children. This is going to affect Black and brown children."
Oh, absolutely.
And we have to understand that in this country, once they propose something, if there's no backlash, if there's no outcry, then they take it a step further.
Oh, absolutely.
So what we may be seeing, right, is a push, at least at this point, kind of a gentle push to getting us back onto the plantation.
Well, it's not even a gentle push. When you think about it,
no,
it's a slide push, because a lot of people are not recognizing what's happening.
And you know what? That's one of our problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not organized.
Right.
Right. So, in the case of what's happening in Israel, between Israel and Gaza, in this country, Jewish people are highly organized. You see them attacking on all fronts.
Right.
They're talking about, you see ads on television, over the radio, talking about the rise of anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
You see the ADL and the JDL extremely active in dealing with, they talk about anti-Semitism on college campuses. And so far, the president of Penn here in Pennsylvania resigned.
Yeah.
And just last week, the sister, I think the first and probably only sister to be the president of Harvard University,
mm-hmm.
she also resigned after this congressional hearing. So the Jewish community, not just here but around the world, is highly organized. So
and powerful.
Uh-huh. So when an issue arises, they already have a plan in place how we're going to tackle these issues.
Absolutely.
For us in this country, we don't have a lot of answers.
No, and in church, they're not talking about answers, and people are shouting hallelujah and running around the church
mm-hmm.
like they've lost their minds.
Mm-hmm.
The bottom line here is the churches need to step up to the plate. Black churches need
mm-hmm.
to step up to the plate and bring these issues to the forefront with their congregation and begin to look at what are some of the solutions that we can implement in order to be prepared when all this craziness goes to the next level.
Well, you know what? That's not good. That's very unlikely to happen.
Oh, yes, I agree with you.
There was a movie I saw a couple of weeks back. There was a pastor down in Oklahoma. I wish I could remember his name. Anyway, at some point, he began to preach that he did not believe in hell. And because of that, he was forced out of his church.
Yeah, because they're so conditioned to believe that you're either going to hell or heaven. If you're a good person, you're going to heaven. If you're a bad person, you're going to hell. And they don't realize heaven and hell is right here on this planet, depending upon who you are and what kind of person
mm-hmm.
you are, what kind of human being you are. Inhumanity is at its highest level
mm-hmm.
ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's across all racial lines.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody is hating, rather than trying to figure out a way how we as human beings can work with one another to live in peace.
Mm-hmm.
I tell people, and I was talking to my sister earlier today, and I said, my life, I live peacefully and I live happily.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't allow anybody to disrupt that
mm-hmm.
in my life. And we've got to get to the point where we live like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we allow people to come into our lives with their drama and their chaos and their hatred and their craziness.
Mm-hmm.
And we think that we're supposed to save people. It's not our job to save people. Number one, most people ain't saved themselves yet.
But you know something? Yes, we all want to live in peace and harmony. However, when you're surrounded by people who are warlike,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It is just a matter of time because before the war comes to you.
Oh, absolutely.
Just 90 days ago, a little over 90 days ago, Palestine, which was living under an occupation since 1948,
Mm-hmm.
these people lived in, I don't want to say peace because they were constantly under threat from, Israel.
Right. Right.
But there was not an active war zone inside the place that they call home.
Right.
Today, Gaza has been flattened.
Has literally been annihilated.
And there are a
How
lot of
horrible
people
is that? How
like
horrible.
you who only wanted to live in peace,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely.
Who would even say we'll accept a two-state solution, right? If we can have some of our own autonomy, right? We can think for ourselves and live the way we choose to live. But, Israel came in and said, because of what happened on October 7th, it's almost as if we have to kill all of you.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, that's a horrible, inhumane way of thinking and of interacting with other members of the human family. Because if you want to be technical about this, God created us all. I don't care what religion you're in. We're all God created. And you're disrespecting God when you kill that which God has created. Bottom line. So I don't care what you call yourself. If you are a warlord, if you are about killing people, innocent people, period, something's wrong with you. You've got some serious mental issues going on there.
Well, the same mentality that is in Israel with Benjamin Netanyahu was right here in this country.
Oh, absolutely.
And I watch a lot of documentaries, primarily about World War II, and the same sort of issue that existed at the start or at the rise of the Nazis. It's the same sort of thing that's happening, not just here but around the world.
Oh, absolutely.
You see, not just in the United States, but places like Romania, places like Ukraine, which is one of the reasons Russia attacked.
Right.
The rise of neo-Nazis, right? And this is happening, all around the world, and it's happening right here in this country, right? And that's another reason that we need to be organized, because we need to have some sort of plan in place. What are we going to do? Not if, but when A happens, B happens, how do we respond?
Absolutely.
What do we do? And if we, Abraham Lincoln, when he was president, he said, a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Oh.
So if in the Black community, our houses are divided, how are we going to come up with a plan? If the husband wants to go right and wife wants to go left and the children are caught in the middle, don't know which way to go, what are our chances of surviving?
Not good.
Right.
Not good. And I was having a conversation with someone recently, and I said, America is blind because it doesn't realize that Trump is America's Hitler. He's gradually coming into a place where he can be the dictator of all things and all people right here in this country. Yeah, he said it. Yeah, right. and he meant it.
And I think that a lot of people, I spoke to someone today and they said, well, Trump said he was joking. In the world that we live in, right, if someone tells you, I'm going to do A, B, and C, who nowadays takes it as a joke? When we deal with 6-year-olds going to school, shooting their teachers, right? Who's going to take a threat as a joke?
There's a saying, the truest things are often said in jest.
Right.
So you better pay attention, and stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. That's one of our biggest problems. We give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Why? Because many of us just want to live in peace. We just want to be happy. We just want to make money and be able to live like everyone else who has money. And so we we, in particular, black women these days, many black women are becoming highly educated. Matter of fact, black women are the highest educated group of people in this country now. And many black women are removing themselves from black men because of the craziness they have to encounter. So they're educating themselves, getting good job, making good money, traveling, and they're saying, I'm done. I have a lot of family members where the women have married white men. They're tired. And they're beyond tired. They're sick and tired. And they're sick and tired of being tired. And you can't blame them if they find somebody, no matter what color they are, who treats them good, who treats them with respect, who takes care of their responsibility as a man to them and the children, to the household. It's not getting better at all because many of us are on the run from black men. And that's the reality. The run.
So that goes back to my original statement, right? Asking, is there trust for black men from black women? And, clearly there is not, right? I know that, I think for this younger generation, I think they're so far removed from our experiences,
right?
From our generation.
They are.
Most of them. So when I was born, segregation was still the law of the land, just as when you were, right? For me to go down south, there was a deprogramming process that I had to go through in order to survive in the deep south.
In the deep south,
there were certain things you did not do because it was looked upon as being an act of disrespect. Like, your dad might tell you, son, look a man in the eye when you talk to him. But now when you go to South Carolina,
you have to look down.
Don't you look a white man in the eye.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Because that tells him you think you're equal to him.
Exactly. Right? And maybe even better.
And that poses a challenge.
And that not only poses a challenge, it poses an opportunity for us to get killed. It opens the door. What was the name of the young man again? I just turned 70. So
Emmett Till.
Emmett Till.
Right.
Look what happened to him.
Right.
That was the most horrible thing I have ever, and I'm sure even more horrible things happen to young black men, young black boys in the South. And if you came up from the North, our demeanor and our way of life was very different, is very different. And so you go down South during those days, and you think that you can still do the things that you do up here in the North. That's a no.
No.
And that's unbelievable, and one of the most inhumane things that I think we've had to encounter. The fact that we could not see ourselves as members of the human family. We had to see ourselves as less than, and when you go through that less than mentality for years and years and years, that weighs on your psyche, on your mind. I mean, on the essence of your being, your whole being. And oftentimes, that doesn't change.
Well, that brings us to where we are today, right? Because, as you get further and further away from slavery, from segregation, you tend to forget, right? And there are so many, as I said, of this younger generation who grew up their whole lives going to non-segregated, schools that were desegregated, right? Never understood what it was like to be called an N-word. So for me, growing up in Brooklyn, New York, I was bused. So, of course, during that time, we're talking early 70s, when they had come out with these affirmative action legislation and the busing thing,
Mhm.
supposedly to provide better educational opportunities.
Mhm.
What about the social aspect?
Mhm.
What happens to the psyche of a child who's taken from an all black neighborhood and put in a classroom with the only black person in the classroom,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
What happens to you,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
So,
But what happens? Okay, we can't even come together as a people. I mean, when I was young, I was called everything but black. Why couldn't
mhm,
I just be black?
right.
Red bone, high yellow, um, um, white girl.
Mhm,
I was probably more black than a lot of the black people I knew.
mhm,
My the essence of my being. I felt who I was. I felt the ancestors from a young age. I felt who I was. And so to a large extent I overlooked all of that craziness from people who were black like me, but darker skinned.
Well,
And so I I chose to remove myself from people who did not embrace me as being a black woman.
mhm.
And that's their issue. But I also understand that that issue comes from their pain, their fear,
And their lack of
and
understanding.
their lack of understanding. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's we've got to stop hating on each other for whatever reason,
Mhm.
and get our own lives together. There's so many of us who are suffering from low self-esteem.
Very much so.
I mean, I'd say more of us than I even want to admit. And I run into a lot. I have run into a lot during my 70 years. And it saddens me, that our people won't get their issues dealt with so that they can feel comfortable and feel like a real and valued member of the human family.
You know, I think that for us, I I guess it is a quirk in nature that we've been taught a lot of things from our experiences on the plantation, and most of them negative.
Right.
So you see the end result nowadays where we don't want to open up and talk about what's going on. It is only when we become strung out that we'll go to an NA meeting and we'll open up in that small closed group.
Right.
But for us to sit down and have something like a truth and reconciliation,
Right. Right.
meeting where we're going to talk about where I, as a black man, went wrong,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And where black women went wrong, how we all went wrong, right? Once we can sit down and have those kind of discussions, then we can begin, when the truth is laid bare, it's there for everybody to see,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
So once we can do that, then we can start the process of rebuilding, right? You know, once we do that, once we rebuild ourselves, then we can do maybe rebuilding of places like the Black Wall Street. Now, do you know that there is an effort right now to rebuild the Black Wall Street?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are a number of businesses that are going down to that section of Tulsa and investing and setting up businesses there in hopes of reestablishing the success of the Black Wall Street.
Right.
But those people have already developed their minds,
Right.
right?
Right.
They've gone through, I guess, their own truth and reconciliation,
Right.
Meeting,
And
a
you have to
singular
do that.
one,
Yeah, and
right?
that's important.
Right.
It's very important. If we have to face ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of us don't want to face ourselves, and I, there was a black man
Mm-hmm.
who I don't like to say fell in love, who I loved
Mm-hmm.
very much. He was a darker skinned black man. But I realized that he would never be able to love me because he didn't love himself.
Mm.
And although he was a prominent black man, he didn't love himself. And I realized because he grew up in the South that he had been bombarded
Mm-hmm.
by all of the negativity, and everything that he was doing was still about proving himself
Mm-hmm.
rather than being himself. And so I moved on. I moved on because if a person doesn't love themselves, it's impossible for them to love you.
Anybody,
Anybody,
anyone.
anybody, even their own children.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we've got to, and I created a program I call Meology, Mastering the Science and Fine Art of Self-Love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we've got to start there. We've got to start realizing that all of the garbage and the baggage we're toting around
Mm-hmm.
has to be released from our psyche, from our souls, from the essence of our being before we can become loving, caring, giving, peaceful, happy members of the human family, dealing with each other in ways that boost us up rather than tear us down.
Well, I think that in America, there is a tendency to avoid bad news, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So if you watch the news or what's called the news, there might be about, I don't know, 10 minutes of world or local event, and the rest
Right.
is just fluff,
Rest
right?
is fluff.
Everybody wants you to wear a smile. So because of that, there is a tendency to avoid the ugliness,
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
So we have so many people that we know, family members, right, that have been self-medicating to avoid the ugliness
The ugliness.
rather than sit down and say, you know what, here's why I went wrong, right?
Right.
I can't go back there, but from this point, I can begin to turn my life back around, right, and right the ship. But after so long of avoiding it, it becomes part of who you are. You become
Yes.
the avoider.
Yeah.
So if you're going to avoid yourself and the ugliness that is within you, you're going to avoid your woman. You're
And
going to avoid your children. You're
absolutely.
going to avoid your community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the power within us will never be released to us until we prove worthy of that power. God is not a fool.
Right.
Okay, people think God is a fool, subliminal.
Right.
Okay, but God is not a fool. You don't get no power because you go to church every Sunday, or maybe Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Sunday, or whatever. God knows who you are, where you are, and what caliber of person you are.
Well, a lot of times, and I know that a lot of us really don't understand our history,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not taught in the schools, and at home, I guess we're not teaching it enough and reinforcing it. But in terms of power, so I was watching a movie the other day called Napoleon,
Mm-hmm.
and Napoleon's first defeat was to who? The Haitian people.
Yeah.
Untrained soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
Napoleon went to the finest military academy in France and was beating the hell out of the people in Europe. But he came over to Haiti and lost.
Mm-hmm.
People will sit there and say, well, in Haiti, they practice voodoo.
Yeah, they want to blame it on voodoo.
Not understanding, right, the power of the spirit world,
Yeah.
right? There's no way that you can tell me that people who have no military training, no military background, and not even weapons
Mm-hmm.
are going to beat the French. The French army that has been rampaging throughout Europe, beating everybody. Now you can't beat people who have no military training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's got to be something, right?
Well, they were.
Within the spiritual system
Yes.
that they have been following, that they brought with them from Africa.
Absolutely.
And that same spiritual system that was in Haiti is also here.
Oh, absolutely.
The problem is nowadays we avoid tapping into it. One, out of simply not being aware of its existence. And I guess the other part is the fact that religion.
A lot of people don't know how to tap into it because religion have stripped them of the ability to do that.
Right. And, I just think that for us in this country, as it relates to religion, as I said, I was watching, the show, and it's a true story. In fact, this preacher just died just last year.
Mm-hmm.
When he stopped saying that there's a place called hell, it wasn't so much the congregation that rejected him. It was the governing bodies
Mm-hmm.
that called him and said, how dare you?
Mm-hmm.
How dare you break away from our version of religion,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
How dare you take from us what gave us the ability to have a mega church,
Mm-hmm.
right? To have this body where we can meet in this huge big room and we could sit in judgment of you. This is all a result of us keeping our people enslaved.
Oh yeah, the white slave masters taught religion to our ancestors.
And 3 sermons. 3 sermons. And here we are, 150 years plus removed from the plantation, and we're still teaching a variation of the original 3 sermons.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what's kept us psychologically enslaved, though we not be physically enslaved anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it was done to keep us down.
But when we talk about physical enslavement, again, down in Florida, there's this bill sitting on the table for the governor to sign.
Mm-hmm. And he's going to sign it.
Well, if it passes through the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
But now the question is, in 21st century America, will it pass? We have to keep in mind Donald Trump was president. We have to keep in mind that not long after he was elected, they had the alt-right rally in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
And people, at least one young lady lost her life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
People were seriously injured,
Mm-hmm.
right? These folks came there with the intent of doing violence.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know something? The FBI has said on more than one occasion that the most serious threat in this country is not from foreign terrorists, but from white supremacist, terrorists.
Right here.
Right, homegrown terrorists.
The homegrown terrorists.
Right.
Exactly.
So for us, a younger generation who have, never experienced anything like segregation,
Mm-hmm.
it becomes blurry as to who the enemy is.
And they're going to be lost in the sauce when all hell does break loose, because they don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
A lot of young people today lack good coping skills.
Mm-hmm.
And because they lack good coping skills, when the shit hits the fan, and I'm not apologizing for that
Right.
word, I'm being straight up.
Mm-hmm.
When it hits the fan, they're not going to have any understanding of what to do. And because they are not a population of people who've learned to come together and work together,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to scatter like roaches.
Right.
And it's easy to pluck people off when
One by one
when we scatter.
And I think that, and as we said toward the opening, there might be 300 Africans on a plantation and maybe 10 or 15 Europeans.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, I think back to when George Floyd was killed in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that day, there were a large crowd on the sidewalk that were protesting and were very angry about what was happening, what they were seeing in front of them.
Absolutely. I remember the
Do you know how many cops was holding back that crowd? One. That little Asian cop, Two Tao, All of these people on the sidewalk, but one person who appears to be the authority held back all of them.
Because they've been taught to fear
Conditioned.
the authority of the po.
Conditioned.
Boom.
Conditioned.
They've been conditioned.
And, for us as Black men, I'm just speaking now to Black men.
Right.
For Black men, disrespect is a big thing.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody wants to be respected. Problem is, how can you be respected when you don't protect your women?
Absolutely.
When you don't protect your community? So for Europeans in this country, you mentioned Emmett Till, this young man went into a store,
mm-hmm.
and the wife of one of these people that would take his life was told that Emmett Till was disrespectful,
mm-hmm.
did not lay a hand on this woman, did not
Mm-hmm.
threaten this woman in any way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But they made an example of Emmett Till so that anybody else that want to come down here from the big cities,
striking fear
absolutely,
at the highest order.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are, again, 150 plus years removed, and there are still Black women across this nation and across the globe who do not feel protected by Black men.
Absolutely. I agree.
Malcolm said the most disrespected, unprotected person on the planet is a Black woman.
Oh, and he was absolutely right. And that
still
still holds
today.
true.
Right.
Yeah, still holds true.
And that, I think, is a result of that distrust that began on the plantation.
Yeah.
And I think now it has morphed. And I think that for Black men, years ago, your anger should have been at that man, the overseer,
mm-hmm.
the master,
mm-hmm.
but you were too afraid. Today, it is now an entire system.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go out and, fight with an entire system.
Mm-hmm.
So you become frustrated, you become angry, and you go home and you take it out on your woman, you take it out on your children,
mm-hmm.
or you take it out on yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That cycle is continuing. It's more than 150 years old, 400 years, and we're still continuing this disastrous cycle, right?
Absolutely.
I just think that we need to sit down, and we need to have, more shows like this where we're going to kind of peel back the onion and, talk about, or at least put on display some of the ugliness.
Yeah.
Because if you have an infection, right? Well, it's not going to get better by itself.
No, it's not.
There's got to be some kind of treatment. And for us in this country, we've got to subject ourselves to some treatment.
Absolutely.
Because if, we talked about this situation down in Florida, if this is allowed to happen in Florida,
it's going to spread like wildfire.
All over the country with his agriculture.
Absolutely.
Right. We will be back out there.
Yeah.
And let's be realistic. They would use people from other countries to do the picking and harvesting because they pay them less.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you think they're going to take young Black and brown people, put them out there on those fields, and pay them union scale salaries?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Not happening.
Right. So we are, even though there's so many Black, I don't want to say leaders, but influential people in the Black community who always tout all of the gains that have been made.
Right.
We are regressing very rapidly.
Oh, absolutely.
And until we figure this thing out, we may find ourselves out there again trying to figure out, how do I get off this plantation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. Very true.
Should be. Yeah. I'll tell you, the hour goes so quickly.
Yes, it does.
Open up the phone lines and get some responses from people, because I know stuff like this. When you have a conversation like this, I know that for my brothers, a lot of them are very sensitive to issues like this. They don't want to hear about the distrust.
Right.
Unfortunately, some of them will lash out, right?
Oh yeah, a lot of them will lash out.
Right.
Because they've not been healed.
Right.
And until they are healed, they won't be able to accept the reality.
Right. And I think it has to start with, young black men, even some older black men who never learned, right?
Right.
We need to, because there was a question the other day, someone posted, and they said, men have feelings too. Well, yeah, but not just that. Men tend to be more sensitive than women, right?
Oh, I would agree with you there.
Oh, yeah. So a lot of things, if you notice, we just react just like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sensitivity, right?
Mhm.
Not taking time to think about what we're doing. We just react.
We just react.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of, my brothers, hearing stuff like this, it makes them want to defend themselves when, what's to defend, brother?
A healed man doesn't see or feel the need to defend himself
Right.
when the truth is being spoken.
Right.
So you can always tell an unhealed man or an unhealed woman
Mm-hmm.
by their response to the truth.
Right. And again, we talked about the truth is ugly sometimes.
Sometimes
right?
it's downright dirty.
But you got to deal with it.
But
right?
until you deal with it, there is no way that you're going to be healed. There's no way that you're going to have a healthy relationship. There's just no way that the power you possess will ignite from the core of your soul, because that's where it comes from.
Absolutely. Well, I guess we'll have to continue this, because we're just really scratching the surface. And I think that we should probably talk about this again or follow up next week and open up the phone lines and get other people to share, their thoughts and their opinions, because this is very, very serious, right? I mean, until we begin to find the root of the problem, and deal with it, we're going to find ourselves spinning our wheels, and we're going to find these divided families, these divided homes throughout America. And realistically, for us in the black community, a lot of the homes, probably a third of them, are headed by one person. And it's typically a woman.
It's typically
right?
a woman, exactly.
So if something were to happen, if there were to be, another, say, alt-right event, like rally, and they came close to a black community, who's going to protect the women and the children?
Well, you go back to the movie The Woman King.
Right.
That's what's going to happen. Women are going to come together and fight to the death if we have to.
Right.
And unfortunately, our men won't be a part of that unless and until the healing process has taken place and they're willing to step up to the plate and be the man that they were created and born into the world to be.
Well, with that, we're going to end tonight's discussion. I see the next show is preparing. But Mama C, it was a pleasure to have you. I hope to have you again real soon.
Always good to talk with you and share our thoughts, and hopefully people will listen and begin to look at themselves and not wait for somebody else to get them where they need to be. We've got to start doing it for ourselves and then coming together. We've got to clean our own closets out.
Absolutely. Well, folks, again, this has been Ron and Roman Hour. I hope to see you again right here next Thursday for another Thoughtful Thursday discussion. And I hope you have a great weekend. We'll see you next Thursday.
All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.